Oh yeah, we're driving. Welcome to Tuesday. Hey, welcome to Tuesday Drive. It's a pretty nice day today. I mean, it's crazy windy. It's about 35 degrees right now, but the sun was shining for quite a while today. Well, there's just a few clouds, but it's the sun was definitely feeling a little bit warm, which means we're getting closer to it. The days are longer. It's, what time is it now? 5:50. It's not dark yet, which is like awesome. And so today, what I wanted to talk about on this particular drive, after I make this turn here, I wanted to assure you that safety comes first. So I'm working hard to be safe while I'm doing this, so you don't have to worry about me. Pretty soon, I wanted to say this, for those of you who followed a long time ago some of my 30-minute sketches, my plan is to, I mean, I'm currently uploading 3 times a week. My plan is to add at least one more. Now that the days are getting longer, I can actually stop on my way home from work to some of this gorgeous scenery that I drive past every day, and you know, just catch a quick 30-minute sketch, and you know, for me that's a little small 5x7 painting. And I did, if you're not familiar with those and you're new to my channel, I'll put a link to one right here so you can check it out. But they're really fun and they're really good for me, so I'm anxious to kind of get back to some of those. So today I want to talk about some of the things that beginners kind of struggle with when they first started painting. And I know for me, all of these things that I'm going to mention are true for me. I struggled with every one of them, and in some cases I tend to lapse, and I still struggle with some of them, but at least now I can recognize when I am, and I can work myself out of it, where before I would struggle with it without really knowing how to correct it. But the first thing is, it seems like when I get to a site and I get everything unpacked and I get all set up, and for me as a YouTuber as well, I have a whole list of other things that I go through. Like, I'm thinking about drone shot and where to place the camera, where the light is in relation to the canvas, and how not to get glare. And so I have all these other thoughts going on. But in general, the whole time I'm doing anything, setting up and whatever, I'm constantly looking at the subject matter and trying to make some determination on what the composition is going to look like. Now, I'd like to say that I don't make compositional mistakes, but that just wouldn't be the truth. And as a matter of fact, I really kind of struggled with the last painting. There were the two elements that were in there, the tree and the barn. The tree was really supposed to be, the painting was supposed to be about the tree. But you know how man-made objects are. Your eye goes straight to them, and then I put in this kind of straw-colored grass lit trail that leads you right back to the barn. So I didn't really help matters any, because the painting really sort of transitioned and became about the barn rather than the tree. So I didn't plan that one out as well as I could have, and maybe Richard, the reason why he scraped this painting at the end of the day was for a similar reason. Maybe he also was having a bit of a hard time deciding what was the most important thing. So careful composition planning is really key to the success of the painting. You can have phenomenal brushwork, excellent color mixing, And if you don't get the composition right, the painting can be a total failure. And so when I don't do well at this, excuse me, when I struggle with this, it's because I don't look at the scene enough and make some careful decisions before I actually start to put paint on the canvas. And I don't know if it's that I get in a hurry and I'm trying to rush, and in the winter time it gets more challenging because the light is moving so fast. You feel like you have to take advantage of absolutely every single minute that you have. And but there are all these distractions and things that keep me from doing it. But now I try and be very intentional about looking at the scene the whole time and trying to make, you know, not long drawn out decisions, but make quick decisions, informed decisions about what it is that I want the composition to look like. And if you look through the history of my paintings, I hover around the cross sections of thirds in the painting and slightly toward the center. So that's where I kind of like to keep the center of interest, and that's how I set it up in it. And so that's that part. The second thing that can be difficult is really focusing on the big shapes first. When faced with a landscape, when you first start plein air painting, the big challenge is that you have all of this in front of you, and we tend to focus on the details of all of these things. And when I say focus on the big shapes, I mean I'm talking about the masses of things. Like in some of the early, or just a few weeks ago, in the teaching series, you know, we were drawing those groups of trees, going back in the distance, and we were drawing those or painting those as just big shapes. And then later on, I showed how you can cut into those and start to define things after you get that big shape set up. So, and I do that with individual trees and groups of trees, anything that's a cluster of a big shape. And it could be, if you're painting a vista, it could be a section of the ground plane that you know, that creates a big shape across your canvas. So I try and break it down and just focus primarily on big shapes. And tomorrow's We Learn Wednesday, we're going to talk about just that very thing, is how the painting process starts. So you can tune into that and check that out, and that'll help you with understanding that. The third thing that, and I was really guilty of this in the beginning, but the third thing was really painting thin to thick. And the danger is never actually getting to the thick part. I had no problem painting thin in the beginning and making washes and doing things like that, but I had a hard time figuring out where the painting needed to develop to, like how far to go, how much paint to put on the canvas. And as a close cousin to not painting thin to thick and not having enough paint on the canvas is just not having enough paint on your palette. So that's something you can remedy from the very beginning, is don't be stingy with your materials. And what I've noticed is, if I don't paint for a few days with my field palette, and then when I go back out and I open it up, there will be a very thin film of drying paint on the surface of what I had left behind. But it doesn't really matter. I just take the palette knife and scrape that off, and I just keep going. So another thing about having enough paint on your palette is by doing that, you will be encouraged to actually use more. And there's nothing that will like totally mess up my mojo, so to speak. When I have a good rhythm going, the last thing I want to do is go digging in my bag and adding paint to the palette because I didn't put enough on it in the first place, because that tends to break my concentration, and I have a hard enough time getting myself to take a break to eat a granola bar or something. So stopping to put paint on the palette just drives me crazy. So I always try and make sure I've got enough. And after a while, you know, you'll figure out for what size painting you're doing how much paint you need, because you know, after a couple hundred paintings, you start to get some clues as to you know, kind of what your flow is like. So number 4 is hanging on to big brushes as long as you can. This will help you a great deal. Now I like to paint a lot on 8x10s, and I do 8x10s and 12x16s. I do a lot of 8x10s because I can get through them in 3 to 4 hours in the field with only about 10% left to finish in the studio, and that's 3 to 4 hours. That 3 to 4 hours includes all the time that I spend fooling around with cameras and drones and all that other stuff that I do, because there is quite a bit of time that's spent you know, resetting up a shot and you know, all of that. But that's typically how long it takes me, and it takes me just about the same amount of time if I'm painting a 12x16 as it does an 8x10. And the reason is I started 12x16 with a number 10 brush in my hand. I try and hang on to that 10 as long as I possibly can before dropping down to an 8 or a 6. And I usually, you know, except for rigor or something for doing fine, you know, some small branches or some small grasses or things like that, you know, I just try and keep that big brush in my hand as long as I can possibly do that, because you're just using more paint, a bigger brush, and really the amount of time I spend doing 8x10 is not that much different than the amount of time I spend doing a 12x16, because with the 8x10 I'll start with a number 8, quickly move into a number 6, and I'll spend a little time with a number 4, and use 2s all the time. I mean, I chew up 2s like they're toothpaste or something. It seems like I always need to add new 2s back into the case, which was a great reminder for me. I got to get some 2s in the case, because I was really disappointed that I didn't have a fresh one with me the last painting I did. Number 5 is practice your color mixing at home. This will save you a tremendous amount of time in the painting process when you're actually out in the field, and because when you know you're on you're painting efficiently, you tend to go on automatic. I mean, your brain just kind of settles in, and you're not thinking as much, and so you're just looking and you're painting, and you're not really thinking about a lot of other things. And the important thing is that give me 1 second here. I'm going to get through this intersection, and then I'll be right back. All right, so the reason that you want to work on your color mixes at home is so that you can sort of commit them to memory, and what happens is then when you're in the field, you don't have to spend as much time thinking about it. And when I was new, I spent a tremendous amount of time just trying to figure out how to get a certain color that I wanted. And after you paint similar landscapes for a while, you just sort of have a feel for, you know, what on your palette is going to produce what it is that your eyes see. But to get to that point, you really have to spend some good quality time just mixing the colors on your palette. And here's my suggestion, and I did this early on, and it was a major help to me. And for a while, I actually carried my panels with me so that I could see when I was out in the field what color it was that I was actually looking at. But I take each color in my palette and I mix it with every other color in the palette, and I just take the palette knife, and you know I don't mix with a palette knife when I'm painting, but for this exercise I did, and I took the palette knife, and you just take equal amounts of all of your colors, and you just go right down your palette, take the very first color, mix it with every other color, one at a time in a little pool, and then take a little bit of white and mix some white into it so you can see what happens when that color actually its value changes with the white. And if you do this exercise, you'll learn a great deal about what's possible with all the colors that you carry on your palette. So and if you practice your color mixing at home, it will have just massive impact on how it goes when you're out in the field. So so there you go. I hope some of these things are helpful for you. I know it was and always is good for me to hear myself say these things, because then it solidifies it in my own mind, and the fact that I have to think about it and process it while I'm not painting, and remind myself of some of these practices that are actually really, really good practices. It's oh, by the way, the color mixing one, I did one on natural grays that's really that I paint a lot with. I do a lot in natural grays and stuff, and I'll actually link that video here as well, so you can see that one if you haven't seen it yet. And all right, cool. So thanks for coming along on my ride today, and thanks so much for being supportive of Tuesday Drive. So far so good, and I like it. So hopefully you're getting as much out of it as I am, and I will catch you later. Where we go from here?